Hello, everyone. This is Laurie Wondra from Your Life Core Radio, and joining me again today is Mark Griffon from Sedona, Arizona, and Sedona Mystical Tours. Welcome, Mark.
Thank you, Laurie. It's good to be back doing the show with you again. I appreciate considering me as part of it.
It's been really fun, and Mark and I have struggled with getting this recorded because our topic today is extraterrestrial beings, the collective light, and others that are interacting with us. And we actually pre-recorded the show, and it was filled with static and some tunnel talk and some weird sounds. So we're actually trying it again today, and we'll laugh along with anything that shows up because we know that there's some interaction that's happening with the ETs. Right, Mark? They just kind of come in sometimes.
Yeah, they like to keep things light with humans because that's one of the big issues. I think any of us who've interacted, received messages, impressions from them, as they always say, don't take things so seriously.
Yeah, that truly is, and there are some that are a little bit more humorous, like even in their messages that they deliver to us, there's interjection of humor along the way. And we'll talk about the different influences that are working with us and why they're working with us and how we can interact with them. And then Mark, being in Sedona, has had some firsthand experiences there, as well as I've had some experiences that I don't often share. So we'll share those as we go along. But before we jump into our discussion about ET, the planetary energy is really heavy, and because, Mark, your background, I always like to get your take on what's happening, and we're still experiencing the immense energy of the full moon, as well as we've got 5 of 9 planets really that are retrograde or moving retrograde, and all of those are pushing on us or getting us to move and are hitting us in our emotional and sometimes in our physical bodies and our spiritual bodies. So I think we have time to touch on that today. Are you open to that?
Oh, yeah. It's a good place in this conversation to start anyway, because that's what's affecting us immediately.
Right. Yeah. And one of the big planets that are influencing us right now is really the Mars retrograde, and Mars is about action and movement and our drive and motivation, and sometimes it's aggression too, but some people are telling me they don't have the energy, they don't have the drive to do simple things such as cleaning their house or getting up and moving. And so I'm noticing the Mars retrograde and just the clients that I'm seeing. And I don't know if you have anything to add about that particular planet and how long we're going to feel its influence as being in retrograde.
Until August.
Until August.
Yeah.
And so, in knowing that, sometimes, people, they moan, they go, oh gosh, when is it going to end? But actually a retrograde is very purposeful in some places, in some parts of our life. And oftentimes it's a way for us to pause and go internal with ourselves and maybe slow down a little bit. And so maybe for some people this Mars energy is bringing up for them states of exhaustion or states of I'm just way too busy in my life and I need to find out ways to bring balance back into my life. So it's bringing that opportunity or that awareness into your life also.
That's totally and thoroughly correct. Retrogrades are slowing us down, and each planet has a quality associated with how it affects us, and that's the area that we're meant to be slow down. Mars is action oriented, and the ego and really the lower human mind always needs to be busy and always needs to focus on something. And so when it's retrograde, it's kind of going against that current. And if you consider that the mind is always looking for something to do, it's going to keep pushing, even though the energies aren't supporting us physically and emotionally. And that's why we're starting to feel tired, low energy. It's because that mind is almost like if you're running your car engine with bad spark plugs and wires. It's like this is time to get the maintenance done, to kind of have a regenerative period for ourselves.
That's a great way of reminding us about the regular maintenance, and I can see how that would be very frustrating for many people, that it's their natural inclination to move forward and drive, and they simply are in a pause point in their life. You know, the other planet that's coming or due to be turning retrograde next week on the 28th is Mercury. And most people know about Mercury retrograde. It's about our communication. It's about contracts, the attention to detail and legal agreements and those types of things.
And computers.
And computers. Yeah. Though, you know, we can't say some of the electrical static is there yet, but we start feeling the influences of a Mercury retrograde or any retrogrades actually prior to them, the planets turning retrograde. And so I always like to remind people that to be aware of that, and it's not to say you can't sign any contracts or you can't communicate, but just be very aware and ramp up any attention to detail that you might have in any legal matters or communication that you send out.
Yeah,
and
that is the point. I'm not interrupting you, but when you want to do something that goes against the grain of the typical rules of Mercury retrograde, then you have to be exceptionally focused with the detail and the communication with the other parties as to what is being agreed to. So that actually is a slowing down of the typical process that one would go through things. Opening a business during a Mercury retrograde, that would be one thing you don't want to do.
Yeah, that's good insight. And then the other planets, Mark, I know Pluto is retrograde and Saturn, Jupiter. You know, can you talk a little bit about those planets or those areas?
Yeah, you know, when you have a Jupiter and Saturn retrograde, you could see slow down economically for one thing. And you know, the dynamics of Pluto being involved, it would probably be the stirring up of all this tension that we're seeing on the both the international and nationally, the political scenarios that have been playing themselves out. But you know, as the retrogrades take more of a hold, then there'll be more likely more compromises. You know, the emotions will start to settle down because we've adjusted to what's taking place and what's being asked of us. And if you aren't a person who's really aware of yourself and not mindful, then it will continue to irritate you the whole time. So it's like you have a choice: is just slow down and really look at what's not working in your life right now, or what isn't working the way you want it to, and begin to have some critical thinking as to why, and make your adjustments. Much like, you know, taking care of the car. If it's not running the way it should, you could keep running it that way, and it'll eventually break down, or you could just take it to the mechanic and do whatever's needed. So this is our personal time to evaluate these areas of our life that seem to all of a sudden be giving us difficulty.
Or they're pointing out where we need to focus in those areas.
Yeah.
That's what I'm picking up. You know, you bring up your comments about the tension that we're feeling right now, and knowing that we've got this Mercury retrograde upcoming, and that's our communication. Sometimes I see in the corporate world that I'm consulting, people might get upset and fire off an email that's got a lot of emotion in it, or we might personally, it doesn't have to be in corporate America, we might personally fire off an email that's got emotion. And I think this might be one of the times to write those emails, but maybe set it aside, or write that letter and set it aside and just wait a little bit if there's a lot of emotion tied to it.
I got a great example of that, because this is a Scorpio full moon, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's it's an early Scorpio degree, so it's a lot of primal energies. And just the other day, a famous personality, Kurt Schilling, got fired for a Facebook comment he made about the North Carolina legislation. So that was a great example. You know, hold your tongue, hold the printed word. You know, really, really think before you send something out into the public domain.
and today we have to be aware of that because of Snapchat and Pinterest and Facebook and Twitter and all those social media tools that a small comment can go a long way very, very, very quickly, and maybe when it's not intended to do that. You had mentioned the energy in Scorpio, and this is dealing with our primal instinct, as you said, our sexual being, our just the core needs that we have from the heart standpoint. And can you talk a little bit about that also?
Yeah, it's a survival energy. And nature has a bit of a kill or be killed. We call it fight or flight. Mm-hmm. The primal energy to sustain ourselves. And, let's emphasize the word primal. It's not something that we need to necessarily respond to or from it. It's just being aware that it's there. We're all going to carry these aspects of ourselves as long as we're on this planet, because we're sharing, the genetic structure and the air we breathe. So it's giving us, everyone a chance to see, where they still hold these rudimentary behavior patterns, emotional, mental, physical needs. So if you start feeling this strong drive to go after somebody, let's say in a sexual way, you still have the opportunity to understand that energy and maybe how to better use it for creative purposes, because there may be the more higher-minded and advanced way of looking at this opportunity is it could bring you to a elevated state of achievement. If you can take that raw energy and transform it like a metamorphosis process in a way, and resurrect yourself from the ashes of your darker psyche into the higher mind. So and a lot of people don't like going into the darker psyche. They're not like going into the depths of their being. They're afraid to, and so this energy is actually propelling us into it. And I would recommend you just let it propel you into it to see it for what it is, and you don't have to react to what you're seeing, but it's really good to know that is inside of you.
I love how the planets are always supporting us, and Pluto is about death and rebirth, and so I feel like we're being supported by those energies. And when you talk about the primal and to let go of that term, I love that because we're in this place of needing to operate from our heart, which is not that fight. It's really to, open up and love and shed light on that. And so I think all of these things are pushing us into a bigger shift into higher consciousness. But it's tough for a lot of people.
It is, and that, most of humanity can't get past solar plexus, the lower chakras. Mm-hmm. And Scorpio represents, the ultimate energy really is a sacred union. And so there's that primal drive to go into the heart with somebody or with everything. And of course, if you're stuck in the lower chakra energy, if you don't and haven't experienced what it's like to go up into the heart and connect with somebody in that way, then the lower drives, the sexual drive and the drive to survival continue to dictate your behavior. And that's why this is an opportunity to see how that's, how these things are impacting any of us. And, really, really look at it, from an analytical perspective. If you want to continue being down there, in a sense, then you're going to continue getting the same results. Mm-hmm. Rough relationships, unfulfilling relationships, like, unfulfilling jobs, and even, in a sense, financial problems.
Mm-hmm. That's great information. And I wanted to come back to the length of time that some of these are going to be in retrograde, because when you said it would not be a good time to start a new business, just because the not just only Mercury retrograde, but then the economy, the impacts of Jupiter and Saturn on our economy. And what's the time frame of that shifting? Because for some of my clients, I get that their time period for interacting or starting new businesses or starting something new, let's say a move, is more in the September time period. And I'm just curious if that aligns with the planet's shift again.
No, it would, because we have another set of eclipses coming up in early September, in mid-September.
Interesting.
Yeah, so it's propelling the ones what we just experienced in March. I always have viewed and tell people the impact of an eclipse has a 6-month window. And so these last two eclipses were about, the most recent one was your relationship of how much you give of yourself, how much you share with the other. And what's really being forced upon humanity, let's say, in a, I don't think it's gentle, but it's being presented to us, let's say, as an opportunity, is learning the essence of interdependent relationships versus codependent. So that's an energy that we've been struggling with in the last actually 2 years. And then the other one was the deep wounds. That first eclipse on March 8th was all the deep wounds, pains, suffering we're holding within ourselves, within our ancestral memory, and sharing with humanity's pain body. So think about it. Those are the triggers that were presented. Those were the opportunities, the platforms that were being presented last month, and then going into this full moon. So is that the time you want to start something? No, it's the time when you want to reconstruct that foundation before you start something.
Interesting, interesting. Very insightful. Well, I know that we could talk for another 45 minutes on the planets and the energies that are influencing us right now, but I do want to begin our conversation about extraterrestrial beings, ETs. And if we're ready to jump into that, I'd like to start by...
better, because otherwise they'll start messing around with the computers again.
I know they'll cut us off. I'm already feeling some of the nudges to allow them to come in. And as I connected, and I did do some channeling with some of those, today I really want to focus on more that are, I'm personally finding they're having a more interaction in our life. That would be the Arcturians, the Sirians, the Pleiadians, and then talk a little bit about Ashtar's command. And beyond those, there are many different types of ETs, and there's been documented 9 different types. There probably are more, and when we speak about those 9 different types, there's the Greys, the Hopkinsvilles, Goblins, Little Green Men, Reptilians, as well as the Sirians and the Arcturians, and those that we are going to talk about today. And Mark, jump in any time with your insight or things that you've experienced. I know early on when I experienced an ET interaction, I wasn't quite, I didn't think about like the separation as to who you are or to label them at all. I traditionally try not to do so much labeling in the work that I do. But I noticed a number of years ago as I was doing healing work, and I typically would work with Archangel Raphael and his healers, and I started noticing light beings coming in, and I would call them the collective light. And then as I got more comfortable, I would ask them who they are, and I got the words the Arcturians. And the Arcturians would come in and stand next to me during healing or during work. And so I kind of want to start with them today. I have a loving place for them because some of the magical work that I've seen in the healing work and energy work that I'm doing is directly from them or through them or work that they're doing. And so it's always an acknowledgement. But they come from the planet of Arcturus. And they're really a 5th dimensional civilization, and so they fit right now with us as we're working towards that 5th dimension, that 528 heart frequency. They really are giving us a prototype of what our future Earth is to be. And they provide a gateway for us, for the humans to pass through during like a rebirth or a death, or even providing the portals to higher consciousness or information or higher frequency that we're being asked to push through. And they are known as the master healers. And I know, Mark, you've had some experience in that with your life personally.
Yeah. In one particular instance, after I had my surgery for cancer, they came in at night, maybe a year and a half or so later, and everyone who's gone through cancer rehab knows you have this 5-year window, and the cancer energy could be in your etheric field. It could still be lingering in your cellular structure. We all actually do carry, cancer in our body. It's just a matter of when it takes over. And they came in as doctors, and they said that we're here to remove the developing cancer. And so they intervened with my physical state and kept me going. So that's one instance I can provide, and I know other people have similar experiences where they're really supporting us. They're keeping us going, like you said. They're not just guiding and directing us, but they'll step in at times when the physical procedures are needed. And there is a bit of a differentiation between that and the angelic presence when it comes to healing, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, there's a higher frequency. I would say they both carry love. The angelic frequencies have more of a heart and compassion and just deeper love. Sometimes I experience the ETs with just wisdom and knowledge and just kind of get it done. And I think that's what you're alluding to, or that's what you're speaking to, is they are a different frequency. They're a different energy. And sometimes people ask me, how do I know? How do I know that it's an angel versus a light being, or and I call them light beings versus the ETs, but I just experience them as that different frequency. I sense their energy very differently. And that's the
only way. It's the only way you're going to differentiate, is to really be sensitive to the shifts and changes taking place around you in your room. And that's one indication. Even masters and goddesses, when they come in, they have a different vibe too.
They do. And each star system and each galaxy has their own energetic flavor, or their own energetic beings, but yet they're full of higher consciousness, or they're fully aware of higher consciousness. But they all bring different skills and gifts to humanity, much like the gods and goddesses or the angels do individually. The galaxies have thousands of helpers that come in and help us, and those are often called a star seed. And do you want to expand on that term at all, star seed, or some other terms that you may have heard along the way?
These are terms: hybrids, star seeds, light workers. Back in the 70s or 80s, I was obviously seeing information about this. I actually was taught by my mentor that we come in from these locations in the universe to, just as they're doing, we're coming in to kind of help the evolution of humanity. And so we're carrying a different level of consciousness, and possibly if we're a hybrid, we have a different genetic code. And it allows for the higher thought forms to enter us, and our vibration to be higher, so we can infect others, the environment we're in, kind of keep everything elevated. Otherwise, with the density that we know this planet can carry with humanity's pain, it would implode.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And we just, we in a sense, we volunteered to come in and provide this service for humanity.
And much like we volunteered to come in, we're always evolving, and that's where they're stepping in right now to help us in that evolution path. And the Arcturians, they're really teaching us that key element of the fifth dimension is love, and that's where we actually need to be. As we talked about these planets that are influencing us right now, what will help us is if we go back to that heart energy, or that love energy, and ask them for their assistance. And much like the angels and gods and goddesses, the ETs are not able to just come in and interact with us unless they are here on a mission, with purpose. They've been guided from, their higher purpose, or we ask them to come in. So sometimes people are fearful of ETs coming in, and they carry this this place of, something's going to hurt me or harm me, but they're here to help us. And that's one of the key things that I think we want to deliver to our listener audience today, is that these are helpers. They're here for a purpose. And the Arcturians are really here now to help us with our spiritual evolution, because we're in that place right now of being pushed and making some of those decisions that we talked about earlier. And they are very powerful healers, that it's a time to take advantage of their being willing to work with us.
Exactly. Nothing to add to that. You said it well. But the heart energy, that's one thing I've really been looking at within myself. It's not an emotion. It's a real, viable energy. And we just have to constantly maintain, in a sense, that awareness that no matter how we're feeling, and I'm an example of that, just to always be kind to ourselves. It's all right to be, and it's fine to be kind to other people, but you have to still take time to be kind to yourself. And even if you don't feel like you deserve it or will be genuinely receiving it, it helps to just continually talk kindly, to just remind yourself that you love your body, you love yourself, you love your experiences, because that starts to shift. It's an energy, and that will help starting to shift. And it's also the spoken word, kind of bringing more of a realization and a connection to these other beings who are seeing your free will attempt to transform yourself. If you just keep everything eternal, then they're kind of sitting there waiting for you to do something.
Mm-hmm. It's interesting that this is coming up in this episode, that kind of you're touching on the I am, but the Arcturians are also helping us to find our version of perfection, knowing that we are perfect as we are, and it's allowing ourselves to be aligned and connected with our divine self of who we are without any of these external influences. So, and they're also about bringing that balance, that masculine and feminine energy, because everybody has both, and being in balance, whatever that means for our perfect self. Not somebody else's version or definition, but just our true, authentic self in that. So,
and we're
interesting.
We're programmed and conditioned to think that we're not perfect and that we need to change and be something else, because we're a consuming society. Therefore, we're programmed to consume and to believe that we need all these other outside influences and support.
Yeah. And there, for listeners wondering a little bit more about some facts about the Arcturians, as much as I could get from them, is they're about 36 light years from Earth. That's a lot. Their lifespan is between 300 and 400 years. And I have found that some of us have actually lived in past lifetimes there and are here to do work here, or we're here to connect with others and do work as couples or work as peers to help others here on planet Earth evolve. So that was kind of fun as I was channeling, or as I was connecting. I kind of got excited about some of their messages or some of the information that they were sharing with me. So besides the Arcturians, and I wanna move on to the Sirians. They're from a planet called Sirius. They have a direct link with our solar system, and the belief is that they also have a direct link with the Mayan and the Egyptians from the Earth civilizations, giving the Egyptians much of their advanced astronomical and medical information, as well as helping with the building of the pyramids. They were very interactive with Earth during the time of Atlantis. And it's often known as it's a meeting place for Earth beings who wish to continue their spiritual studies. And I'm not saying as you pass or as you die, you go there to continue, but you might travel there during a meditative state. You might travel there during dream state or sleep state to continue your education or to gather more wisdom. They are known to be the education almost like the college or the place that you go gather wisdom and just maybe just meet up with other very high intelligent beings. So.
I agree, and I know I've had a lot of dream time experiences of doing that, and like you say, sometimes people that are gifted with the ability to meditate and travel beyond the speed of light in a sense will physically, or I mean not physically but consciously be there, and you're right, it's I call it like the Oxford of the universe, where you get the highest degree of training that you're capable of receiving, and then you bring it back in for the benefit of your personal life as well as those around you and humanity in general.
They've been interacting with more of our scientists, and I know with my background in computers and technology and then your background, there's also a connection with more of the analytical parts of our brain, and they're interacting because there are more that are wanting more fact-based. So for example, when I channel them, my language changes, my vocabulary changes, how I deliver changes. They're more straight to the fact. They don't, there's not a lot of humor other than maybe a little bit of sarcasm in there, but they deliver a message like straight to the point, and it's based on fact, and it's based on, get it done kind of messages. So I don't know if you have anything else to add in that. I know that you've interacted them just given your background, but
what happens to me, this is something that others may have or will experience. Some of the books I have are very profound, very deep. The Urantia book, Keys of Enoch, Alice Bailey's writings, and that's when you start studying that, it's called you're being encoded. The codes are coming in, and they're the ones that are supporting in that process. And if you want to say it's neural pathway activity, then we'll just label it as such. But I have studied these books and literally felt neurotransmitters firing off in my brain. And they are the ones I think that are supporting and conducting that flow of higher intelligence. But you have to open yourself up, not just with meditating, but to going into some materials that are very profound, that are challenging, where you read 2 pages and you sit there for an hour and contemplate them.
Mm-hmm. That's great. So their role is to teach us and to provide more information. And you and I are both knowing that those are great resources, and ones that I personally too go back and check in. But there's also there's new information coming, and they sometimes are the bringers of that information. So I'll be curious to see what gets evolved or what comes out in the future for us as more of these communication channels are opened up.
I agree. Yeah, I totally agree, because I've been watching the evolution of this since the, like I said, the late 70s and early 80s.
Yeah. Well, and I think about the time that the gentlemen were there from California, and they were measuring the vibrational frequency in the Sedona area. And you've had a number of other, whether it's the Travel Channel or other venues, come visit you. But there's a science to that, and that's what I find very beautiful. And working in an engineering company for almost 20 years in my IT, I totally understand all the measurement components that we're just now starting to wonder about and say, hey, I wonder if I can measure the frequency of the heart energy, or the flame within the heart, and the vibration of energy on the land. So that comes to mind when I speak about the Sirians, is I have to believe that they've had some more interaction with us humans to get us moving in that direction. So
yeah, everything you're saying, there's no reason to disagree with it, but it's got a constant theme, and that's moving forward, that's growing and evolving, and that's the essence of why we're here. And if you have a life where you're not growing or evolving, these are opportunities to to listen to the information and understand ways in which you can begin to start some form of some process in doing so. And I think that's what this energy, also the primal energy, is saying. Okay, are you going to stay in this primal state of surviving, And with surviving is a lot of fear. Or you're going to go into the heart and realize that you can manifest what you really are needing and wanting and desiring to do with life.
Mm. That's a valid point. And I'm wondering if for those people that maybe are at that threshold or asking those questions, if they are interacting more with them just to help kind of push them over the threshold or push them through the doorway to help them.
Yeah, I think that's partly what they do, especially with, let's say, the light worker starseed who hasn't decided to embrace that part of themselves. And we know this. We see this all the time with the people we interact with. They're intimidated to step into this next step of the stage of their life because it's requiring a little bit more discipline and responsibility for their actions and thoughts.
It is, and I personally, I was there too a number of years ago and having to make that decision, but sometimes the decision isn't yours. Sometimes it is just, it's the universal force that moves you along. So,
and that, to me too, in my mid-20s, I don't mean to interrupt, but you said the anecdotes, I didn't want to accept that what I was really meant to do with my life. It was presented to me by my mentor, and I backed away because I just wanted to have a comfortable material existence, and they shut everything down in my life. So the ETs and the angels, they can work in conjunction, but I think when it comes to physical blocks, these extraterrestrial types have more interplay in what takes place. Like they could cause your car not to start, and we all had experience. They could cause something to happen before you get on a plane. They do the material, physical things. In my instance, I didn't want to step forward with it at that time of my life, and they blocked everything in my life, so I had no choice.
Yeah. Well, you and I got stuck in the desert, and we laughed like the next day, and it was a great experience because it forced us to sleep out in the desert in this skull rock. I mean, literally, it was shaped like a skull, and we both got immense downloads. But we talked the next day because I had a flight to catch back to Minnesota, and so I was kind of panicked. But we both said they kept us there. We were kept in the desert. We were kept there for that purpose. And once we kind of let go of that, then we could relax a little bit. At least I could. In that. So I agree wholeheartedly.
I could too.
Thanks for a great story about being stuck in the desert for a couple of days. But so I want to talk next about the Pleiadians. And the Pleiadians, they say, they say they're about 400 to 500 light years from Earth. And I know a lot of us that we just can't even relate to the distance of that, but I'll throw that out there. They are really, I'm seeing their interaction with us as we move more into the creative arts and using creative energy. And you had touched on this earlier when you said to redirect some of the intensity of the energy maybe into a more focused, and maybe some of that focus area is into the creative parts of our living. And creative energy doesn't have to be about painting or drawing or dancing. It can be other creative thought. But they're bringing that energy in. Yep.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
When we were kids, think about Rod Serling and Gene Roddenberry, The Twilight Zone, and Star Trek. And it's like, we look back on those episodes, what was being presented, in the late 50s and the 60s and 70s, and this is where the Pleiadians come in. You're talking about the creative energy. Well, that creativity can be in concepts that are presented through a creative art form of some sort, but the message is extremely deep, and it also, the Pink Floyd songs, Led Zeppelin songs, things that have really abstract meaning at that moment that they're brought in. But when we look back, we go, oh, this was a stepping stone that led us to a far deeper and greater awareness.
Right. And so much of what we're learning about music right now is coming out in the vibration and how our chakras align to the notes and the actual vibration and how all those things are tied and linked together. And so the Pleiadians are actually interacting with us through sound, through music. I know personally for myself in the last 2 years, a lot of sound healing and vibrational healing. And when I say healing, it's not all about physical. It can be our emotional, spiritual, or even just helping us evolve or expand. But there's a lot that's opening up for us now in the field of sound and how we hear it. Our ears are tuned a little bit different. We went through tuning last year with our senses, and our bodies are feeling the vibration a little bit more. So the Pleiadians are interacting on that way to help us move through this transition period with some other tools. And they also have immense love when they come in to work with us. So they're working more with the goddess or the divine energy, and that fits with the love or the heart energy. Some people that are refusing or just not understanding that heart energy might be struggling, and that's where I feel the Pleiadians are coming in with another way to link with us. And so I mentioned music, but they're also highly interactive with our agriculture and nature. So, and if you notice the uplift of education and knowledge about what we put in our bodies, and Mark, you've touched on it in the past, just making sure that we are putting good nutrients in our body, the fruits and the flowers and the vegetables and those things that are trace minerals, absolutely. Those things that our physical bodies need to really elevate the frequency through our other emotional bodies. So they're interacting very much in nature, and I always encourage my clients to get outside and be out in nature, and I love connecting with the elementals. But also, in channeling the Pleiadians, it's like that's another place that they connect with us. So it's been kind of fun to channel them.
Yeah, they tend to be most people's favorite group.
They're light and they're humorous. So even sometimes in delivering some of the most serious or could be very difficult messages, I find that they deliver them with deep love and also some humor. And we both know how humor can be very healing for people because it is a higher frequency. Laughter brings us into a naturally higher frequency. And I think that they deliver those messages, and it's another way to raise our frequency, but then we're more apt to hear the message, feel it, and embody it, versus if we're stuck at a lower frequency.
I agree.
So let's talk a little bit about who governs them, and that's maybe an earthly term. We always like to think like who masters the masters or who governs them. But I like to think of it as Ashta's command is really Lord Ashta has got the galactic force, it's known to be Ashta's command, really is a great protector of Earth. And we can think of it in our terms as almost as if a military type of force that protects space and the planet, not from war so much, disaster, but just overall general. So it could encompass those things as well as overseeing our own growth on planet Earth and protecting us and making sure that we're aligned with our soul journeys. There's been, I think back to the term of Federation of Planets. That term's often been used in some films and fiction books. I mean, it's been there for as long as I can remember. Yeah, decades.
Well, it makes look at it rationally. The universe, beyond our solar system, it's not necessarily the Wild West where, all kinds of sporadic things can happen with no oversight. So I think the free will component of each planet, the individuals on the planet, the overseers that are directly assigned to it, are part of an evolutionary process. And then the Ashtar command would kind of be an executive level locally, just to make sure things don't get too crazy. And there's not too much conflict, between all these different extraterrestrial groups, because we have the United Nations, but there's still lots of conflict that occur between countries and a lot of political maneuvering that happens. And you got to consider that these extraterrestrial races have different philosophies, different purposes, and the same thing could happen there. So there has to be a bit of an over-controlling influence that says, that has the final say on whatever actions are taking place. It's just a rational view of an extension of how we live beyond. Just compare anything we have here. There's always a central influence of power, authority, whatever term you want to look. There's something that always has to be a deciding voice and action. And the Ashta command would be that.
That's great. I love thinking of it in that way, and that makes so much sense to me. I as you were talking, I was brought back to a time that we had done a ceremony in northern Arizona in the Flagstaff area. We were doing an initiation. One of my shaman steps into the white wolf ceremony, and we were at I can't remember the name of the place. Paki runes. Thank you. And you were getting set up. You were getting set up to what we were doing for that ceremony that night, and I was by myself, and there was no moonlight. It was new moon, but I remember looking up and just seeing the galaxy, the millions of stars. And then as I settled down kind of into the energy of the desert, I felt this fear rise up in me because I could see these small, and what I thought they were small children walking across the desert. And it wasn't until the next day you and I talked that I realized that these were adult Indians, Native Americans at that time, but in their lifetime they were just smaller in stature because of their bone structure, but I thought they were children. And it scared me, so I directed my eyes back up into the stars, and that's probably my first interaction or my first realization that I was looking straight up into a ship or a star, something that was greater than me, something that was watching over me or was protecting. And in my channeling or in my knowing sense, I just had this immense feeling of love and protection, and knowing that there was something that was overwatching, and that I was there in the perfect spot I was supposed to be, where I was, and the fear just left me. But I also found the duality between the earth beings, ancestors, as well as those from outer galaxies connected there in that desert. So
yeah, there's once again, let's look at these analogies. I always use analogies to help people understand. And on Earth itself, on the material plane, we're sharing this Earth with the elements of nature. So animals, birds, trees, bushes, plants, the soil, the clouds, the moisture. All these things are different, are kind of like different categories, if you want to look at it that way. But we're all sharing this experience together. So we go into these other dimensional realms, if we use that term. You have ETs, you have fairies, gnomes, you have the angelic spheres, you have the goddesses and masters. Why should it be any different? It's a cohesive process. It's just that we physically don't see it, but it's no different than the cohesive process we're living in.
Right, and at that moment, that was my realization. It's like the beauty of there's not a separation. And there was so much connectivity on that land, on that spot, that just made it very magical for me. So you're absolutely right. It brings up that awareness for us. It should be no different.
Yeah, did you know I was hiding behind a rock laughing at you as you were wandering around?
No, I didn't know that. Thank you for sharing that today, though. But you had mentioned to me at a later point too that particular place had some tie to the Orion.
Yeah, I watched the show, and they were saying that these ancient ruins, like Mesa Verde, there's something in the Hopi, a few places in the Navajo Res, and this is at the beginning of the Navajo Res, right? It's outside of Flagstaff. They kind of like took a map, and they pinpointed like stars, these different Indian ruin locations, and they formed the Orion belt.
Constellation.
Yep. So that's the connection.
That's awesome. I just love when there's a connection that, at the time I had no idea, but there's divine connection. And again, the connection that they're always interacting with us. So, other things, other interactions that you've shared, I mean, there are places that are known to be blocked off or locked off, or like Area 51 is one that keeps popping up as an area that we shouldn't talk about. It's mysterious. But I have to believe, too, that there's more coming about, or there's more realization that there are interactions with us, and we have to pay attention to that. So do you think, are there ever any times that we should not call in ETs to help us? Do you have a philosophy about that, or a belief?
I really don't have either.
I don't either. Yeah.
They have bases, New Mexico, Arizona. The defense minister from Canada, the former one, he's openly come out and stated that there's areas in Arizona and Nevada that these extraterrestrial groups have free kind of a coming and going authority or use. And okay, let's look at you're in a life situation, and you're facing a challenge. Are you going to immediately call your parents, your siblings, your friends, or are you going to just sit there and try to deal with it on your own first? And so calling in the ETs is the same thing. It's like, okay, you're up against something. Yeah, your car breaks down in the desert. Well, of course you're going to call on help. But typically you want to find your own inner resource first. And then you have, this, I would be your, I hate calling them categories, but you have these ways of connecting with your guides, and then beyond your guides to something else, and then beyond that. So the circumstance dictates who you're calling. If you have a physical issue, well, definitely calling the ETs. A lot of people, when they have car issues, that's one of the first places they go. Get me out of this situation, at least get me to a gas station, or, some place where I can get my car fixed. And I've seen that happen personally, and with other stories I've heard.
Mm-hmm. I have, you just brought up another memory for me. I know sometimes when I would fly into Phoenix, like really late at night, I'd take the 11 or the midnight flight, fly into Phoenix, and then drive up to Sedona. And I would be so tired, and all I would say would be, I'd look out over the horizons, over the stars, and I'd say, just keep me awake, just get me to Sedona, and I would just have this burst of energy, and sometimes I just felt like I floated to Sedona. But it's that conscious asking them to come in. And one of the reasons...
Yeah, I got an anecdote for that. I've driven up from Phoenix at night a lot, partly because I like leaving Phoenix after everything's settled. And I've seen a craft positioned in the same part of the sky for so many of my trips up. And what I know they were doing is they are not just keeping me awake, which wasn't an issue because I have a cup of coffee, but I could see like blue and violet rays ahead of my car because there's a point between Phoenix and Sedona where there's always been terrible crashes and people making their transition. It's like a midpoint between the two areas, and so seems like they're always around that area to make sure nothing ever happens as I travel. And you experience the same thing, and I know others have too. It's not to keep you awake as much as to keep the other people awake so they don't run into you.
Yeah, well, and I definitely felt very protected, and that is, I guess the one thing I wanted to just bring out is just to distill any fear that people might have about calling them in and calling in bad energies. I just don't have that reference point, and I just want to share that with people, is that they're here to help us and not cause us ill harm or interrupt our lives or take us off track or anything. They're really here to help us on our journey.
They are, and the only thing in the universe that's going to do those negative things you mentioned is what? It's another human.
Right. That's very true. That's very true. And as we've said earlier, they've been in existence here for hundreds of years. Some of the old drawings on caves and art from ancient civilizations. We talk about maybe the Pleiadians or the Arcturians and their interaction, or the Sirians, their interactions with ancient tribes. And there's often pictures of spaceships on cave walls that have been, there for hundreds of years. So they've been around us for a long time, and they'll continue to guide us on our our journey.
Even in the Egyptian relics, I've seen pictures of ETs, etched into the petroglyphs or hieroglyphs.
Mm-hmm.
So it's biblical stuff too.
Yeah, and when I was talking, I was getting information from the Pleiadians, and I just tuned in that they're more connected, or were more connected to the North and Central American Indians, and that's where their art is often reflected in some of that history or some of that interaction with them. So they have strong ties here. They have strong passion for our earth and for us as we
I had a native friend who said that they would show up in sweat lodges and sit with the Indians.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. Very interesting. I think that they show up a lot more than we thought they did or think they did, and I know going forward they're probably going to have more of an interaction with us, just because they want to and we want them to. I wanted to just ask a question about the reptilians, because most recently I have had a number of clients that have reached out to me and specifically asking me if I work with reptilians or work with reptilian energy. And I simply had to say no, because I don't distinguish. I don't, the wording of the email was more in a negative way, and I don't distinguish. If I'm called to work with someone or to help someone through an issue, it's not because they're one thing or another. But can you tell me more about the reptilians at all?
Well, it's kind of ironic, after our last attempt at recording this, when you started talking about the reptilians, I lost your voice. I didn't hear anything for about seconds.
Interesting. Yeah. Interesting. Well, we know that they interact with us, but they have a philosophy of developing the power and the structure of self first. Then you develop, you contribute to the collective. So much like a reptile, so many of them are solitary creatures. Reptilians have that kind of a characteristic. You could say it's maybe a left brain approach, where there isn't as much of an awareness of how one's actions affect others. Nonetheless, it's not a good or bad thing. It just is a different approach. And so that approach, we can see it reflected in a lot of the structures that we have in our lifestyle. Be it religious, political, financial, corporate, social. We have a reptilian brain as well. So there's a part of us that has that need to dominate and not take into consideration the side effects and collateral damage of our actions. They're more evolved, of course, and advanced than the way we present it, but nonetheless, that's the association with us. So when people are bad-mouthing the reptilian, it's the part of themselves that is being reflected back to them that they haven't accepted and understand. Yeah, and that's a good way to put that. And they might be standing out. I don't even like to say it that way, but they might be more noticeable, or these particular people might be noticing them more, just because they are more self, and we are in a time of more collaboration, of more community, more working for the greater of all versus that individual being, or that individualism piece that you might be speaking of. So there might be some of that opportunity for us to experience them in those different places that you mentioned. Yeah.
Exactly. And once again, it's they all have their purpose in place, and maybe there's a bit of imbalance with the influence of reptilians here more than the other ones, but then everyone has to ask, well, why would that be? Because maybe we associate with those qualities or characteristics of reptilians more, and we just don't want to admit it.
So it's mirroring us, something that we need to work on.
Yes, exactly.
I love that. Well, Mark, we are coming in on the close of another hour, and any last words of wisdom that you'd like to share with our listeners?
Yeah, just look at it, take a practical, rational, common sense view of everything we talk about, because you can reflect on just looking at life's conditions and just expand it to these other realms. It's really no different. We all have different purposes, qualities, ways of presenting our divine presence and essence. And once again, the Ashtar command and the levels above the Ashtar command are allowing all of this to take place. So it serves a purpose of evolution, of greater growth. And so we can't label it, we can label, but we can't judge what we think is going on because we really don't know for sure.
Yeah. And we like to label and we like to judge, and I think those are the big things that we get to learn to let go of, or to develop different patterns around those things.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So with that, I want to remind our listeners that you're listening to Your Life Core Radio. I am Laurie Wondra with my co-host Mark Griffon of Sedona Mystical Tours. And from all the helpers that have joined us today, and from my co-host and myself, we wish you this. May all your dimensions of your energy be expanded and then infused with the high frequency and vibration of love. May you be filled with joy, happiness, and peace as you continue your journey. Along with the helpers of the universe, we send you huge beams of light and love. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Have a great
day.